My ideas come from my life. I tell good ideas from bad ideas by the one that lasts. I never doubt myself. Doubt's man's greatest weakness.
In 2012, a teenager from Los Angeles, by way of the Philippines, Saudi Arabia, and Hong Kong, had an idea. Rhuigi Villaseñor had a vision of streetwear, with all its requisite nods to hip-hop and skate culture, expressed through the lens of Americana, and he called it the Bandana Tee. But that was only the first in a series of wild successes and crushing failures that would lead Rhuigi to realize his ambition in a brand that he would call RHUDE. As RHUDE scales to heights he barely could have imagined at its inception, Rhuigi continues to challenge himself and convention with every design. And it all started with one idea. You grew up in the Middle East and Hong Kong and the Philippines before coming to America at age 9. How did that experience inform your perception?
I don't see attachments in things that I build or things that I do. I see them for the moment and what they stand for, and I know the effects of it, but I come into things with full honesty and integrity with storytelling. But I know that things aren't certain. Growing up in Saudi, seeing, all the cultural things of community-based eating, going to the mosques to pray with my family, these sort of created a melting pot in a way for me to just see a perspective in what I could do in America. We were living in my aunt's living room. There's 4 of us living in the living room. My father was able to strap some cash together. We lived in a 1-bedroom apartment up in the valley, and it's quite the time of my life.
I've seen Jay-Z wearing that hat a few times.
Mm-hmm.
I have to ask, what is the nature of your relationship with him? How did you become connected? And is he an investor in the brand, or are you guys just friends?
I was asked to come to Rock Nation. Jay and I were able to speak in the office, and we were chatting, and I was wearing the hat. I told him how important it was, and as soon as I left, I get a call and like, yo, I need that hat. And then long and behold, it's the photo of me and Jay in the Lakers game. I don't think I ever even really told him, like I used to walk from school back home, and I would listen to Reasonable Doubt. I would listen to those lyrics as if they were a business plan.
I know in the beginning of high school you start drawing. What was it that you were drawing and what were you trying to articulate?
I studied faces. I wanted to do realism, and I was exploring different emotions through like oil-based medium, oil pastel, even oil painting. I was that kid that would sit next to any person that was quote-unquote talented, and I would sit next to them and I would emulate their methods in less than 5-10 minutes. I was that annoying kid.
Where does that competitiveness come from?
I remember when we first arrived, my dad, he told us that in a non-negative route that we were a little bit behind and we needed to work a little harder than anyone else. And that excited me. I was so scared that I wasn't gonna be good at any language. I was like, well, I left too early in the Philippines for me to understand the full literature. I don't know Arabic that well. These are things that I'm like, oh, I'm never gonna be good at anything. So I put these challenges for myself, and it sort of translated into almost everything in my life. I like to keep a competitive field between all of us. I'll sit next to even a design intern and I'll challenge him to who could do a better graphic, because that's what I think the best comes out of people, when you challenge them.
As a kid, did you really give any thought to what the future of your career was going to be?
No. I had no idea what I was gonna be. I was actually in 10th grade, and I can't get a job because of my paper situation. At the time, I didn't have the right paperwork to get a job.
The family was undocumented.
Yeah, we were just at that scenario at that time. And so I was like, well, I gotta make sure something, I'm looking at my father, my father and my mother were situated, but myself, I just was not. And so I was like, well, I gotta figure out how to make this right. So I figured out through timing that there was a new culture emerging. The rapid growth of social media and the internet revolution, it was like perfect timing. And I saw that, that there was gonna be an evolution within streetwear as well.
What was your connection to fashion at that point?
To make money, to survive. In high school, I used to steal clothes. So I would steal it and sell it to the kids at a discounted cost. After a while, you know, you build all these things, you're like, well, there's a business here. There's a reason why these people are buying it. They don't even care what the design is. They're buying it for the brand. So what I did was I thrifted a jacket and I put a label on it. Put a label on it, I sold it for 10x.
When you say label, you mean like from a luxury house?
I just snatched one of the labels from one of the vintage things. I took a Saint Laurent label and I put it on a red, what is it, LL Bean jacket? No joke. So then after that, I was like, I have to build a brand. Money to me means access. Money to me means freedom. Money to me means ability to explore all my ideas.
Prior to the advent of RHUDE, there was another brand that was very short-lived.
Right.
Primitive. How did you come up with that?
There was this brand called Alien NYC, and they were building something in New York City, and I thought they were so cool. And I'm like, well, I gotta build something in LA that could feel like that, where we're just sort of a collective. I found different vendors in swap meets that sold Cazal sunglasses and Linda Farrow sunglasses, and we started buying them all out. At the time, they were just $25, $50. And you know, as to anything, you control the market, you get to sort of create the price point for it. You know, then came out Lady Gaga. That former partner of mine sold like some sunglasses to someone, I sold it to Gaga, and this created a whole like sort of time period in streetwear fashion, which came to be the vintage.
The advent of MySpace really changed everything. And all of a sudden, people are networking. You ended up connecting with several people who would go on to become real architects of global culture. Who were those people and how did you make those connections?
I remember me and Barney on MySpace showing each other clothes. Rocky's whole crew was emerging in New York. I strapped, $500. I sold all my clothes. I bought the ticket and I had $100 in my pocket, cash, and I flew to New York City and I stayed in a buddy of mine, Curtins's couch.
And what were your parents saying when you were like, yeah, I'm gonna buy a ticket to go to New York and stay?
They were like, what are all these meetings? And we laugh about it at lunch because my dad used to, like, he's a very strict, like, military father. Like, he'd be like, what are all these meetings for? Like, you keep taking these meetings. And even if they weren't meetings, I knew in my head that I had to put it in this realm for me to really believe it. You know, it's like, I tell my guys in the office is like, when we design, whatever cap you put onto your design is the only thing we'll reach. You know, it's like if you wanted to only make 30 t-shirts or 30 jacket designs, by the time you reach 30, you already feel like you fulfilled it, you know? So to me, I'm like, I don't want to have a cap. So when I would approach these meetings and just like a little meetup of, I took them in my head as a meeting, like a proper meeting, but that was like, well, eventually it'll become that. I wanted information. I wanted a lot of information. I wanted to know how to really conduct proper business, because then I was able to see the people and build real serious relationship. You have to build a relationship and a rapport with someone just without business or money on the line. It's just as if you and I are just becoming friends, you know? And that's sort of how I came about with building the business. I became friends with them more than anything, which, you know, in this whole entire world, relationship is everything, you know? And I sort of created that, like, organically. I was rolling around with these guys in LA, and they said something so valuable to me, which I'm still friends with these fellas. They were like, you're still living at home, and you're still with your parents. Take this opportunity to get as much money as you can, because you don't got bills to pay. And I'm like, oh, you're right. Like, I'm gonna get older, I got bills to pay. So the more pressure and more competitive I got with myself, not just with people, I started to really better myself on just financial.
What did you do next?
I traveled. And I really channeled on what I was trying to do, which is build a brand. Building a brand and making a product are two very, very different things, you know? And when I thought about it, I looked to all the successful brands and I studied. I don't have writer's block. I design from a personal space, so there is no block if everything comes organic.
How did Primitive go sideways?
Yeah, I created that crew, and come to find out, the store is being built just off of Ventura. And at this time, it was growing and growing, and I was like, well, I can't do this. Like, I can't go against someone that sort of just used my name and created that, you know. Not that if it was intentional or whatever it is, don't really care. It taught me a real life lesson that you need to trademark your ideas, you know? You need to copyright and trademark your ideas.
Do you have any favorite pieces?
The leather hoodie. I was like, if I can make a hoodie that looks like a helmet and looks like a motherfucker's rich as fuck, but he's wearing sweats, it's probably this.
From his vintage hustle, Rhuigi had developed a sense for who his potential consumers were and what they were looking for. But he still had to learn the hard way that starting a brand involves much more than coming up with a name and printing some tees. Sent back to the drawing board, Rhuigi invested in education and prepared to take another swing. How are you funding all of this?
Back to the hustling of the vintage clothes, ways to move, you know, get $300-400. You go to these little fashion parties, different store openings. I took that as an opportunity to come in and be freshest or meet the freshest people.
How are you even learning about just like sourcing these materials, getting the stuff printed, fulfillment, shipping, all that kind of stuff?
I met this guy named Mario in the Valley. He was a screen printer, and I really coined it all to him. He gave me all the information on screen printing, every single thing he knew. He saw me as like his son or something. And I would sit there with him every day after school, and I would learn photo transferring, squidgy cleaning, all the different methods of like, as if he was like my master and samurai, you know, and he taught me all the foundations of, if I were in a kitchen, cleaning the squidgies and cleaning the screens, all that. It taught me discipline.
Armed with new information and competitive urgency to establish himself, Rhuigi distilled all his experiences and influences into a single t-shirt design, the Bandana Tee. Worn by Kendrick Lamar on the BET Awards stage, the striking design would light up the internet and forever change Rhuigi's bank account balance. All over print had been extremely hot in that 2008 period, but by 2011, 2012, trends were going in different ways. You sort of zigged when everyone else was zagging. How do you arrive at the idea for the Bandana Tee?
I came back from New York. I saw that they were referencing a lot of West Coast culture, NWA to be specific, and I realized that there's no one in the West Coast that's going to claim that, and otherwise it'll be the East Coast taking it. So I came back home and I realized that I needed to create something similar to that. And having a artistic background, I was thinking about how I can redefine the classic, which is the bandana. I didn't see a bandana as gang related. I saw it as a Western print. How I designed at that moment, that time period when it was a 10 SKU brand or 5 to 10 SKU brand, you tie up a story, you tie up a real cultural phenomenon and just socially, and you tie it up into a storyline.
How does the Bandana Tee end up on the radar of Kendrick's stylist?
Kendrick is coming up with new music. I could intuitively, you feel that you can feel when someone wants it bad, you know, and then I'm a big energy guy. If you translate to the world your energies, you're gonna make it. Chances are you're gonna make it. He gave out that aura and I was like, this is a once in a lifetime legendary moment. Like I gotta participate. Met his stylist at the time, and I also met Dave Free. And they were like, well, we don't have anything to wear for this. Like, what do we do? I'm
this
like,
is the 2012 BET Awards?
Yeah. And I was like, wow, go on. And I got this. Shirts came out. I was connected to my PayPal and there's Google searches for it, like what is this Bandana Tee, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I didn't even have a bank account. You know, I didn't even know where I was gonna forward that money to. But the fact that I was making more than $500, my cap was always like 500. I made like 150,000, I think, that day, or 200,000. I was crying. I was like, you know, this, you know, and I always, till this day, I always thank God for everything. First thing I thought of was like, this futon is gone. It's gone. After that, what I say about that kid that saw those iconic brands. I went to go meet those iconic brands. You know, I was like, you can't understand quality until you taste quality. I've never really consumed luxury. So let's go in that store and buy that luxury. Then I realized, oh, I got to pay for production. I got to make clothes. I have to live. This is now a company. And I ran the whole thing dry. You know, it's rainstorm in my brain. I'm like, oh my God, I've got nothing. One, I wasn't gonna sell what I purchased already because I felt as that was defeat. It was a step backwards. And I could never take a step backwards, it was always forward. I thought about it, I'm like, well, okay, cool, let's figure it out. Then I created a business model in my head that I didn't even know I was doing. I started to pre-sell things. Did a pre-sale schedule. Boom, hit another one, hit another lick with the same Bandana Tee. So then I made the mistake already. I took it back and I was like, wait, nah, we have to reinvest it into the company. And then it was able to grow. It's just the drive and knowledge. You know, you can only speak of what you know, and the more you know, the more you can talk.
When you're doing this, how much of it is going down on paper and how much of it is just floating in your head?
Most of it is floating in my head. I'm so afraid of people having access to my brain. It's my only thing that I can hang on to. I process criticism by packing it in a bag of shit and throwing it away.
How did you land on the name RHUDE?
I didn't want to call it too much of myself. It needs to be short and easy, but you can't really define it. And if I could do it, it'd just be this word, and I created that word.
What was the significance of the RH within your family?
It's a tradition that every single one of my families have.
So your dad is an RH?
A Roderick. I was like, well, the brand building starts. I don't have heritage to pull back from, but I do have as a family heritage that I could use, which has been going for so long.
So what was the first item that was released under the RHUDE brand?
It's actually the Bandana Tee, because I re-released it.
Oh, you re-released it?
I re-released it as a full scale now, like you will now recognize this Bandana Tee as RHUDE. Then I did these long sleeves that had, you know, NWA references. I did these hoodies that were racing reference, like Malibu racing, whatever it was. And I did these hoodies that had cigarette references on them, which is now sort of like became a few DNAs of the brand. And that's where things really started cooking. I was like, oh my God, things are getting so real. Do my little pop-up with Guillermo for the Bandana Tees, boom, did it right again. Had Travis there, had Rocky there. Like, this is the most serious like time of like, which now is probably impossible to pull together, you know? And it turned into something. You know, I was like, okay, I could obviously feel that this is a growing subculture. My second season was like, fail. It was called Revolution. It failed because it was so progressive. That shattered me. Like, I went down to where I was like, okay, we're gonna have to figure out, maybe we might have to move back to 2-bedroom, Dad.
You're still self-funded, so what does this do to your cash flow situation?
Oh, it was bad. I was like figuring out, I was hustling different vintage items still. Never wanted to like put anything on sale at RHUDE. Never wanted to hurt the brand name or any of that. I was like, I'll take the shots. I'll figure it out how to build it. I went back to my foundations. I studied on what works. If you take things that are effective and you combine them, chances are it's going to be effective. So I pulled elements from highest selling things and I've combined it into a product and I created a Sugarland tee. Surely enough, boom, and I put a story behind it.
What was that story?
Basically a kid, a real American story of like someone that wants to do more for themselves, but is stuck within the means of their socioeconomics and their community. And Sugarland felt like such a bittersweet term or like a story to a book. So I created that.
So the appetite for RHUDE starts to grow exponentially.
Right.
And all of a sudden you start having fulfillment issues. What is that like to get over the excitement of everybody wants a piece of this to seeing kids complaining on Instagram and, you know, where's my package, and they don't ever send the stuff, that kind of thing.
This is someone that spent money with you, that trusted your vision, that felt that they had a connection with you and your garment, and they're just upset that you aren't able to fulfill that. I took it personally, and I felt to myself, I'm like, well, this is the make it or break it moment for a brand. I got real serious with the business. I sat down and studied for hours, watched YouTube videos, I read books, I asked my friends that were doing slightly better. I did everything that I could to understand, how do we deliver these products? Fast, efficient, and cheaper than anyone. I used like the first real serious Sugarland, RHUDE money, whatever, bandana. I paid for my freedom.
How so?
My freedom to leave the country. And I was able to go to Paris for the very first time. I was in Paris, and a buyer from Barney's gave me an opportunity to meet. I was like, oh my God, Barney's, I have to go. And I sat there and I gave the pitch to the clothes, and I was pulling it, and I remember I had them feel it, and I was delicate about it, you know, like really showed that I care about these clothes. Next day, they wrote me an order, the biggest order that I had to date. And I was like, whoa, I got Barney's. I did that, and I had this massive order. I'm looking at it like, oh my God. I'm fantasizing about what I'm gonna buy with this. And I'm like, well, how do I minimize as much as I could spend on this? Found a production guy in Turkey, and I was like, here, produce all this. The worst decision I ever made. Shipped all of it. Everything fit wrong. Everything was wrong. Oh my God, this is not gonna sell. This isn't the wash. This is not even my label. This is not even my graphic, let alone the fit. I was like, well, I told the story so romantically, and I'm serving up trash.
Did you have to eat the investment in the stuff that was made in Turkey?
It was probably $250,000. Felt like my world was coming down. I thought about quitting.
As RHUDE's success began to snowball, so too did its challenges. With his back against the wall and an entire season of products scrapped, Rhuigi was forced to pay for his mistakes. However, the adversity inspired him to find a new partner and adopt a new discipline.
We're able to sort of negotiate a deal. As to anything, these are people, they negotiated a deal for me to recoup. I got some friends to throw some money in there for nothing. Hired the right manufacturers, hired the right production company.
So you redid the entire...
I redid the entire thing.
Who is handling your books and that kind of stuff?
Me. I was bookkeeping myself. I'm like, if there's any time I can learn all of this, is right now, in the middle of the battlefield. I'm gonna learn every single thing about this business. So then when I hire people, you can never take me out of it.
So how did you go about learning these things?
Mistakes, paid for them. Paid for them big time. Didn't ship, boom, paid for it. You know, refunds, boom, mistake. Returns of clothes, boom, mistake. Bad sell-through, boom, mistake. Talking to buyers, that's a mistake.
At a certain point, you also added some partners to the business.
I took on a more mature partner. I wasn't as informed as I am now with just things, and I couldn't conduct them. My brain wasn't there. I was just a rugged fighter, and I needed to bring someone that was mature, that could make mature decisions for the business, and that could help guide me and sort of teach me.
And how did that affect the business moving forward?
There was a growth just on production alone. I was able to focus on design, and he was able to look into production and bring in different infrastructures as, you know, business, financial advisors and proper credit line for the company, you know, different things that just is essential to growth of the company.
You mentioned sort of that balance between creativity and the commerce. Has there ever been a piece that you were like, I am not going to be able to sell one of these, but it is so beautiful, we have to make it, I don't care?
This is the McLaren runway jacket. I mean, for this thing to be made, everything is meticulously hand cut, hand sewn. I mean, for the leather to arrive, we'd had to have ordered it, what is it, 3 months ahead or something. And it's such a beautiful piece, but it costs like a McLaren.
You mentioned McLaren, that you've done a collaboration with them. Many streetwear brands do these types of collaborations with blue chip brands outside of the fashion space. How do those relationships work?
It's organic. We built a real friendship. there, and a fellow by the name of Daniel, he was able to tee up all these guys and sort of build this this community around me. And it's been my drive for my recent business endeavors now. Like I really look to them as inspiration on brand building and what it means to move a business forward.
When you look at the marketplace and sort of project out over the next year or two, what do you think are going to be the trends that are a direct result from sort of the recovery from the pandemic?
I think people are going to want to dress up. I'm seeing a lot of it. I think we've had enough of the sweatpants, and what's going to happen is we're going to want to feel that comfort. Maybe it's about blending it. You can't ever go back. It's always a process of evolution. So what the evolution is, it's what we show in the runway.
Do you remember what year you topped $1 million in top line?
2017, we did $1 million. Yeah.
Crazy.
I was running off 4 people, maybe 3.
And ballpark, how was 2020?
2020 is beautiful. 2020 we did a little over 18, I think, 18, 20. Yeah.
It's incredible.
Thank you.
In many ways, at its inception, RHUDE was a very singular expression of your personality.
Right.
It's now the expression of 20 people's personalities. Mm-hmm. How do you approach managing just that number of people, but then second of all, that number of people working in synchronicity with your vision for the brand?
So what you do is you treat it like an engine. It could be the fastest engine, fastest Ferrari engine, but without gas, that car can't move forward. So I figured out that every season that I have these guys that are like, technically sound, and they're all amazing for what they do, but I'm the storyline to the whole thing. I'm the gasoline for the Ferrari to function. I'm really thinking about what it all means to me. Whether I am the brand or RHUDE is the brand.
You've worked for yourself your entire life. You've never had a boss or been a part of a larger system.
I never had a job.
Could you imagine a turn of events in which you became, say, the creative director of a Fendi or a Hermes?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Would that be an exciting thing, or?
Yeah. I think it's inevitable.
You've built a business that is incredibly personal to you, in its name, and the heritage, its foundation, it's rooted in you. Could you imagine a turn of events in which you sold RHUDE?
In the beginning of the conversation, I said I didn't have attachments to things in my life, and I still don't. I see them for what they are for a moment, and should life lead me that way, cool. And if should the ship sink, build another ship,
What are your goals? What are the goals that are in front of you still?
Exploring my story, my family, my heritage, whether it be in this vessel or whatever vessel I create next, helping build generational wealth. I always talk about how there is no, it can't work. I think if you think it can't work, that's actually the indicator of it should be a project that you should do. So much of right now is what works. We need more of what can't work, because what can't work can build a conversation. It can build tension, a conversation, being uncomfortable. That's the most important thing in life, is to feel uncomfortable, because you're growing.
What are the things that you've reassessed or that you want to change moving forward?
Moving forward, the real big conversation is in design and just in any business alone. It's how does this save the earth? And I hate to take it to there, but it really will be the most important common denominator moving forward. What products can we make that could stand the test of time, that essentially could be passed on to generations of the people who are purchasing our stuff?
You have a number of different creative pursuits. Painting.
Yeah.
You've made that chair.
Made the chair.
I've heard that you're dabbling in ceramics.
I am.
You've done some music making in the past as well.
Flower arrangements too.
Flower arrangements, there you go. Right. So how do you prioritize your sort of creative output?
I don't, I live. Things are if someone is creative, it's not a choice, it's a lifestyle.